I'm Ruth Appelhoff, the Executive Director of Guildhall. Welcome to the first annual Hamptons Institute, presented by Guildhall in collaboration with the Roosevelt Institute. A weekend-long symposium featuring leaders in their fields discussing issues currently impacting our community, our country, and the world at large. I would like to thank Mickey Strauss for spearheading this idea and recognize his efforts. Let's give him a round of applause. Thanks, Mickey. And recognize his efforts and those of Ellen Chesler in bringing all our esteemed speakers together. Thanks, Ellen. My deepest appreciation to our lead sponsor, the Tar family. A round of applause, please, and the co-sponsors. Our first panel this morning is titled Building the Infrastructure for a New Economy. It is moderated by Jeff Madrick, Roosevelt Institute Senior Fellow and author and contributor to the New York Review of Books. Please welcome Jeff Madrick.
Well, thank you. Thank you for waking up early and coming to our little event. I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our panelists, most of whom I have known for quite a while. Bernard Schwartz will be our first speaker, and as many of you know, he's currently the chairman of BLS Investments, but built the giant firm Laurel Space and Communications, the high technology company, into a Fortune 200 company over the years, I think, since the early 1970s. He's a very active political force in America. He sponsors a lot of programs at universities and think tanks. We're very grateful to have him here. He will be talking about his ideas about how the need for public investment, in particular in infrastructure. Following Bernard will be Rob Johnson, who I've gotten to know in recent years, also a very active public policy person. His government experience goes back to the Senate Budget Committee I guess it was under Pete Domenici, but I think, no, it couldn't have been under the leadership of Pete Domenici. Yes, it could have been. It was William Proxmire, actually, his main years. And he went on to become a hedge fund manager for a while. He's very active with George Soros, and in fact, leading this new effort in a search for a new economic program. And most important to us, he's a senior fellow at the Roosevelt Institute and heads the economic policy program there. Our final speaker, who I don't know very well, but we are delighted to have him here, is Van Jones. He has started 3 nonprofit organizations, largely based around environmental issues, but not entirely. Let me get this right. The Elia Baker Center for Human Rights, Color of Change, and Green for All. So obviously he has 2 major interests. His book, The Green Collar Economy, has been widely read and is widely influential, and he will talk about his ideas about energy jobs, green jobs, and so forth on this panel. So please welcome our participants. I think it's appropriate they come in now. That's a cue, folks. Yeah. I thought I was supposed to come out last, so I always bring my book bag with me. I want to talk, I'm going to participate a little bit in this as well, and I just wanted to take 5 minutes to set the stage for what we're going to be talking about. 'Cause I think this panel is about what America wants to be, and in fact a little more than that. I think it's about what America needs to be. And most of the panelists, I think probably all the panelists today, believe we are on the brink of something. This is not business as usual. America has its future in its hands right now. We have lived through 30 to 35 years of an ideology that has called for the consistent limiting and restraint of the uses of government. Now, to some degree, that's always useful. To some degree, government always has to be refreshed, pruned, rethought. But it got carried to extremes. And we saw the end result of those extremes in 2008. And suddenly, we lived through a period where we believed, and mainstream economists believed, we had solved the policy problems of the economy. The great age of moderation, it was called. And that notion stuck with policymakers up until basically 2008, certainly the end of 2007. It's always good to remind ourselves that Ben Bernanke, a bright, well-meaning, and well-educated man, had no idea the subprime crisis would spread as late as July 2007, or so he said, several months after Bear Stearns already went down and had to be sold at distressed prices, and there were already calamities in the market. Only then did he begin cutting interest rates, and cutting those interest rates turned out to be not nearly enough. Fed policy wasn't working, and in the late 2008, or the second half of 2008, the economy fell. Free fall, really. The government had to step in, and most people welcomed it. We had TARP, a program I don't think, and maybe many of you don't think, was well thought out. I think we will pay a price for it. The government should have gotten a much better deal on it and had more influence over the course of the credit markets and the banking community. But the $700 billion bailout did stabilize the markets for that time. It was necessary. Had we not bailed out AIG and Citigroup in some way or other, I am not sure that we could imagine the calamity that would have followed. And then we had President Obama's stimulus program. And I want to reiterate, that stimulus program did work. That stimulus program has created jobs, has raised the GDP. I don't think it was structured very well, but, and it probably should have been larger, but it was quite a political achievement early in that administration. And we may indeed we certainly need another stimulus again. Just to clarify that, in the 6 months before that program took place, that stimulus program, the economy was falling at a 6% annual rate. GDP was falling at a 6% annual rate. We were losing jobs at roughly 650,000 a month. When that program was put into place, the GDP started growing slightly. Consumer spending came back, not because people were making more money in the private markets, but because of the increased transfers and the automatic stabilizers, and job losses were reduced in half to something in the order of 300 to 350,000 a month. It did work, but what's the outlook right now? The outlook right now is the best we can do, perhaps, is 6.5% unemployment rate in 2013 if the economy grows, if we don't have a double dip. 6.5% is more or less the worst it got in the recession of the early 2000s, and that's the best we can expect 3-4 years down the road. These are difficult times. The unemployment rate, as you know, is hovering around 10%. 9.5% will probably go to 10%. If we include part-time workers and workers who want jobs and can't get them, it's more like 16%. The shocking number to me is, while 15 million workers are unemployed at the moment, perhaps 35 million workers in 2010 will be unemployed at one time or another. 35 million, extraordinary. But having said all that, and I'll be quick after this, having said all that, our problems have been longer term than this. We have had, in my view anyway, an economy that has not been working properly for years and that we have neglected badly for years. 1% of the population has received 58% of the real income created in this economy since the mid-1970s. That's an economy that's not working. That's not a class issue. That's not a class argument or a class clash. That's simply an economy that's not working properly. Male incomes, a typical male earns less now than the typical male after inflation did in 1969. We have ignored, neglected, and I think this is what we're going to address on this panel mostly, ignored and neglected transportation infrastructure, R&D in America, environmental issues, social equality issues, business innovation, education, and healthcare. And now we face big deficits. And we have a huge argument in America about whether this government can handle those big, abiding, long-term issues. Can America really do this when it faces this large deficit? These are some of the issues we're going to address. I'll let our panelists speak now. Each will speak 10, maybe 12 minutes, present their case. I'll wrap up a little bit. I hope to maybe ask them one or two questions, but then I hope we have plenty of time to engage the audience and have a fun, interesting, provocative, and constructive back and forth. So again, thanks for waking up so early. We will start with Bernard Schwartz. Bernard, thank you for coming. Do you want to?
No, I can do it from here. Your introduction is an interesting introduction, but I would be much broader and much more severe on our system. We're not going through a difficult time in the United States. We're going through a crisis. But the crisis is a worldwide crisis. Every nation in the world, with the exception of maybe Brazil, India, Australia, New Zealand, and they're not large enough to make a big difference. Every nation in the world is cutting back on their GDP, with the exception of the United States. Even China is a reduction of about 30–40% in GDP. So we would consider 7 or 8% growth terrific. For them, it's nevertheless a cutback in terms of GDP growth. We are expanding mainly due to the stimulus that went into effect, but those stimuluses were short-term. They're not meant to be long-term. The worldwide crisis reflects the fact that we are almost on the edge of deflation. Our world has never been able to handle deflation very, very well. There is very little growth engines in the world outside of the United States. The distinction about America is that we have had for a very long time a growth economy that has had setbacks from time to time. We've handled those setbacks. The problem today is the perfect storm happened all at one time. And it's a reflection not of the fact that some people miscalculated about their growth investment. It happened because since 1999 and 1997, America has been embarked in a different philosophy than it had before. Starting way back in up to 1970, 1975, the amount of infrastructure investment in the United States was about